Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. This is Wednesday evening, October 14th, 2015. We're in our live program on iblog.tv, and we are recording the message or teaching portion for our Preacher with Parrots account on YouTube. I started doing this, it doesn't seem like it was all that long ago. I was even concerned that this business of recording at the same time I've got a live group might not work too well. But I just noticed that we have 125. There are actually a couple that I haven't published that are there. So we actually have 125 recordings we wouldn't have had we not tried this. And I was afraid it would kind of deaden us, kind of make it a little too stiff, that y'all wouldn't feel free to interact. But apparently that hasn't happened, so we get people not only here but also there. And when I think of 10 years of Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, when I started on live video, I didn't know how it worked, and people were telling me, friends from Live Digital were telling me they were watching my program. I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know that live video automatically recorded everything, and they knew what they were doing. They knew how to go back and find these programs, and I didn't even know I was making them. That went on for several years. And then when I went to stick them, somehow they failed to notice that I went past the 2,000 video limit. And when they closed down, I had over 5,000 videos there that, of course, when they closed down, we lost them. And then at Ustream, for a while, I was paying so that the videos, and even though I was paying so they would keep them there, the people watching them either had to pay or watch commercials. But those are gone. Anything I make there now stays up for a month. So there are a few sermons that go way back under the name of Mountain Lady Preacher that have been on YouTube for a long time, and Hermana Barbarita had some. I wish we had started this a long time ago. All right, here we are. We ended at the end of 2 Chronicles 29. Now, if you haven't watched this before, as I mentioned, everything that happens at the same time or discusses the same thing in the chronological Bible, you get it at the same time. 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings talk about the same thing, just like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John talk about the same thing. And so we keep getting 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings giving us the particular story about the divided kingdom. In addition to that, we have the prophets, which either prophesied at that time or prophecies that were fulfilled, made earlier, but fulfilled at that time. We have them there too. So we jump around a lot in order to keep this story chronological. So that brings us now to the prophet Hosea. I'm going to read just a little bit, and then I'm going back we're reading in Israel now. After I read a little bit in the prophet Hosea, chapter 5, I'm going to go back and we're going to talk about what happened in Judah while this was going on in Israel. This is the prophet Hosea. Hear ye, O priests, and hearken. He's talking to the priests. Remember, right now, Judah, although this is in Israel, Judah has a very godly king, Hezekiah. Israel never had one. And Hosea, the prophet, is talking to Israel. Now, their history is godly. But since the sin and decline of Solomon, it's been worse. Hear ye, O priests, and hearken ye, the house of Israel. Give ear, for judgment is toward you, because you've been a snare on Mizpah. He's mentioning some places now. And he says, you've done no good in these particular places. You've been a snare on Mizpah and a net spread for Tabor. And the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have a rebuker of them all. He speaks about Ephraim now. Ephraim was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. And today, the Jews, rabbis, begin everything with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, so we're talking about the same person. The last two sons born to Jacob were Joseph, and you remember that his brothers sold him after he became big in Egypt, and his brothers showed up to buy grain, and he recognized them. They didn't recognize him. Now, the reason they didn't recognize him was the last time they saw him, he was a kid. If you're 20 and 10 years go by, you're 30, you're going to remember and recognize that person. If you were 11 and 10 years go by and you're 21, somebody who knew that 11-year-old may not recognize the 21-year-old. And they recognized him, and he found out that they had another son. And it just happened that the second son was a full brother to Joseph. His name was Benjamin. They were both born of Rachel. They were both born of the favorite wife. And so they were very, very special to Abraham. When they say here, when they mention Ephraim, they're talking about one of those 10 tribes in the north called Israel. Because in the south, we have Benjamin, which was a tiny, tiny tribe, and Judah. The only other tribe we have there isn't mentioned as though it were there, because it was the Levites, and they were there at the temple. They didn't own property. I know Ephraim and Israel, meaning from the north, is not hid from me for now. Ephraim, thou committest whoredom, and Israel is defiled. How can a nation commit whoredom? What is it? what does a person who commits whoredom do? You become unfaithful to the wife, and you go looking elsewhere. And that's what Israel did. They were unfaithful to God. And they were out in the high places. I'm amazed that some of our Wednesday lessons and our Sunday night lessons are coming out about very similar things. And what Israel had done, and we mentioned that it started with Solomon. Solomon loved the Lord, was faithful to the Lord, but he loved his wife, the one who was the daughter of the Egyptian Pharaoh. Whoa. You know I can't preach without a pen in my hand, right? I just dropped it. I'm going to have to pick it up. I think this might be a different pen, but it's a pen nevertheless. Okay. He loved his wife, and when she and his other parts of his harem, because he had between wives and concubines, he had 1,000. Didn't even know them all. But most of them went off to the high places to worship pagan gods. And his wife went to worship a pagan god. And he even went, back when he was still serving God, he even went to the high places. That's where the altars to the pagan gods were. But he worshiped the one true God. But he did it in a place of paganism. See, very seldom do we go from saint to sinner overnight. It's little steps. And he went from letting his favorite wife go to accompanying her, and while there he worshipped. And we're going to talk later what worship is. We throw words like praise, worship, things around, and sometimes we don't really know what they mean. Tonight, maybe about a half hour, we're going to talk about what worship is. But he went there and he worshiped. He worshiped the true God, but he worshiped the true God in a place dedicated to paganism. And at the end of Solomon's reign, when he lost a lot of the respect from people around the world, by that time, he was in the high places, and hi Kimberly, and he was worshiping pagan gods. See, it's a step by step by step. So when he refers to Ephraim, Ephraim was one of the older of the 12 sons. The two youngest were Joseph and Benjamin. Judah was one of the older ones. So Ephraim, he's only referring to a specific place among those 10 tribes in the north, which they refer to as Israel. He said, "You have messed up in the various places where you've gone. I know Ephraim and Israel is not hid from me." If you think I'm not aware of what you're doing, I am. They don't frame their doings to turn unto their God, for their spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. To commit whoredom, kind of nasty language that I would probably say prostitute instead of whore. But this is the King James Version, and it's pretty clear. You stop being faithful to the one you should be faithful to, and you become intimate with someone you should be having nothing to do with. Now, that's on the physical side. Same thing spiritually. Someone who is faithful to God, and then because they're discouraged or for whatever reason, start looking around, checking out the other girls. I heard on the news when I woke up this morning that I'm from Southern California, for those of you that don't know, and one of our sports figures married to or had been married to a Kardashian, was in a brothel in Nevada and was found either between last night and early this morning, unconscious near a brothel. And of course, we know what drugs and what was in his body. They've already done that. It's allowed in Nevada. So he says, this is what Ephraim, that area, that's what you're doing. He said, and Israel is defiled. They will not frame their doings to turn them to God, for the spirit of whoredom is in the midst of them. You do what you do because it's in you. Nobody enters our body and does stuff. We must first consent to it. And the pride of Israel does testify to his face. Therefore Israel and Ephraim will fall to iniquity. Listen to this. I'm going to back up a half of a verse. Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. Judah also shall fall with them. This is a prophecy. Not only the 10 tribes of the north will fall, they will lose their nation. They will lose their ability to live in their land, and another country will come and get them and take them out. But it's going to happen to Judah. Right now, Judah's in good shape. Judah's got a king that if the high priest isn't doing his job, the king gets on him and tells him to do it. And I'm sure that they were surprised to hear this. They shall go to their flocks with their hands to seek the Lord, and they shall not find him. He hath withdrawn himself from them. You think you can just go to God when you need him and say, help God, I got a problem? Well, he said the time will come. He has withdrawn himself. I am not available to you. How long can a man or a woman be unfaithful to their spouse. And since they're using this as an example, and commit whoredom, and then just come back home and everything's hunky-dory. I don't know any women that way. He said, and the time will come. You come home all happy and smiles, and sorry, I'm not available to you. They've dealt treacherously against the Lord. They have begotten strange children. You know what begotten is? Begotten simply means to have a child. And so begat so-and-so, and so-and-so begat so-and-so. You've read those genealogies. And they have begotten, given birth to strange children. These are not, and this is spiritual. The children that have been born are not like loving and faithful to their parents. They're different. But then look at who begat them. Blow you the trumpet in Gibeon, the cornet. Cornet's a little bit smaller than a trumpet. And we'll play notes that are a little bit higher. I know when I was in high school, I was one of the few flautists who could play a piccolo. Well, I'm sure the rest of them could. I happened to have one. And there were very few cornets. I played in our school band, but also when I was in junior high, I played in a university band in the summer when they took younger kids, and in a symphony orchestra. You don't find many cornets. We don't find that many trumpets in a symphony orchestra, which you do in the bands, even in the concert bands. So blow a trumpet in this town and a cornet in that town, and cry aloud, O Benjamin. Benjamin is the little tribe in the south. So he's talking both to the north and the south. Ephraim shall be desolate in the day of rebuke among the tribes of Israel. I've made known that which will surely be. The princes of Judah that removed the bound, therefore I will pour out my wrath upon them like water. Ephraim is oppressed and broken in judgment, because he willingly walked after the commandment. Therefore will I be to Ephraim as a moth. God says, I'm going to do to Ephraim what a moth does. A moth is destructive. You ever get one in your closet? I think it's been years, like maybe 60 or 70 years, I think, since I've had to deal with moths. But I remember as a kid that we used to hang things in the closet, and sometimes our clothes would really smell bad. But it was to keep moths out. They would, they literally ate your clothing. Now, a moth is tiny, can't eat that much, but who wants a piece of your clothing? You never know where the moth is going to eat it. He said, I'm going to be to you like a moth. In other words, I will slowly but surely destroy you. And I will be to Judah as rottenness. Something that is, yeah, me too. Rottenness spoils. It stinks. It's bad. The thing of it is, it's destructive. And God says, you can't play around. Ask me to take care of you, expect me to look after you, and then you commit spiritual whoredom? when Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah saw his wound, when the 10 tribes in the north realized they had a spiritual problem, and when the 2 tribes in the south saw their wound, the sore on their bodies because of this dis-ease, and went Ephraim to the Assyrian. Assyria was a much larger nation, couple of countries over from Israel. Go through Syria, part of Arabia, a little bit north of there. You get to a large, on the other side of the Euphrates River, you get to a large country by the name of Assyria. So when the north and the south saw the results or heard what the results would be, they went to an Assyrian. They went to the king. The king cannot heal you nor cure you of your wound. Now they're talking politically and militarily. You say, so God isn't going to be there for us. That's okay, we got Assyria. Don't count on Assyria. When Ephraim, from the northern, saw the wound, and he said, okay, I'll ask Assyria to take care of it. He could not heal you nor cure your wound. For I will be to Ephraim as a lion. That portion of the northern tribes of Israel, that particular tribe, I will be to you like a lion. Not too many lions left on their own are friendly. I will be as a lion, but I will be as a young lion to Judah. You can take a baby. You can take, I've had in my house cats and birds together that are one or the other is a few weeks old. I've got videos, old videos that are about 40 years old. When video photography first came out, I was training police dogs, and while I did use it a lot in the ministry, I used video photography to view the training of police dogs, so I could see exactly what the animal was doing, what I was doing, how quick they reacted, and every little detail. Because when you teach a dog to bite a person, you want him to bite them properly. Or to find somebody, you want them properly taught, and so you study it. Athletes do the same thing, use video for the same thing. And I have pictures of birds and cats. Now, I have one picture left because I lost the picture on the computer, but I had printed one out. Sammy, the dog that was about 14 years old when I don't want to say went to be with the Lord, but when he was euthanized not that long ago, I have pictures of Captain, the big bird, raising him. Captain fed the dog the same way you guys have seen these birds feed their babies. Captain fed the dog the same way. And we used to, I don't know if I could find it tonight. because I don't have my pictures right now in any particular order, but you know what, Kimberly, I will look for it and try to have it here at the computer and do it later. I have some pictures here, but I don't have those. But it's up here. And the videos I were talking about, they're several generations old, but I can get them out. I can even play them on an old video player. The thing of it is, we used to, when I would go down to the village, I live in a mountain, and when I would go to the village, the bird, in order to feed the dog, has to be higher than him. And Captain would sit on the steering wheel, and Sammy the dog would sit in the driver's seat while I'm in the store buying groceries. And they would start this business where the dog is feeding him, and a crowd would gather. And it was something rather unusual. Okay, nevertheless, he says, to this nation that has never served me, the 10 tribes in the north, I will be as a lion. But to those that at least part of the time have served me, I will be as a baby lion. What is the difference? A baby lion, a baby anything, is not dangerous to you. It can be taught. It can be made gentle. I will tear and go away, and I will take away, and none will rescue you. One more verse. And I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense. Admit that you were wrong in what you did. That's acknowledging your offense. God says, I've had it with you. The tribe that has never served me, consider me a lion. The tribes that sometimes serve me, consider me a baby lion. Verse 15, I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense, till they admit what they did wrong. Both the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And seek my face in their affliction. I think some of you may have gotten the prayer requests I sent out today, and I asked the people to please pray in God's will. It saddens me that people only come to God when they want something, when they hurt, and they want to stop hurting. And the rest of the time, they're not interested in Him. And because I was in a hurry, I did a lot of copying and pasting. Some of the prayer requests, I feel I have to rewrite them. I will not ask people to pray for some of the things that people write in and ask me to put it that way. But because I copied and pasted and tried to save time, I put that in there. And you will notice that I said, please pray in God's will, not just because you want to quit hurting. And I gave one of the reasons. There are lessons I've learned and things I know I never would know if I had never suffered. Oh, yeah, I'm cancer-free. And I did it without chemo. And God could have healed me before the surgery, before the suffering. instead of after a little suffering. But now I talk to doctors and other people, and they listen, because they know the doctor that did the surgery. I was the worst case he had. And on the other side of the coin, I came out better after the surgery than the rest. And I didn't need chemo. God knows what He's doing. And I'm a different person than if I hadn't suffered. And sometimes God needs to get our attention. Sometimes we don't pay attention until we hurt. And for God to come in and just heal us because we hurt, it might be that we're missing a lesson that can only be learned by suffering. After my last surgery, I think the surgery was on a Thursday. Anyway, my friend was here Thursday and Friday and had to leave on Saturday. While her husband was a longtime minister, our district superintendent. He is with the Lord. But I knew him before they knew each other. He was a young student in a church, which is one of our biggest churches in Southern California, and he happened to be there during the time I was giving a revival meeting. I have another close friend, the two people in the world that can put their signature down and it counts as mine. And I was so sick. And one of them was right there. I told her where the anointing oil is, go in the kitchen, on this side, on this shelf. And I told the other friend on the phone, and she began praying in the Spirit. I have felt as close to the Lord as I have on other occasions, but I have never felt closer to the Lord than I did at those times. Hi to those that are just popping in the room. I'll chat with you after our lesson if you like. And we are recording this on another computer. And if you miss part of it, you can go to YouTube and go to Preacher with Parrots. Now, I remember praying, Lord, I receive every benefit from Calvary's shed blood at this moment. I never felt so close to the Lord. I would not trade that occasion with my two closest. My other friend was born on the mission field. I would not have missed that experience in order to have saved myself a few hours or a few days of pain. So he said, I'll return to my place until you acknowledge your offense and until you seek my face. And in your affliction you will seek me early. Now, I want to go back. I got to make a mark here so I know where to come back. We're going to come back to Hosea, chapter 6. But we're going now to where we last talked about the southern portion, or what was referred to as Judah. And I've got to find where we ended. Let me find the exact spot. I've got it marked here. We ended last week when we were on this topic. We were in Isaiah 1. And we read, let me just by reminder, "Come now, let us reason together, said the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they can be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool." And from there we went to Ahaz, who went to Damascus and made that weird thing they used for offerings that was pagan. They went to Damascus, and Uriah the priest built it. You remember that Hezekiah the king, not the priest, the king, more godly than the priest. They had been using as a pagan object anything that you worship is pagan. We worship God, not things. And an object that God used, they had turned it into a thing of worship. People will tell us, well, if I stand in front of this picture when I pray, I can pray better. Or if I have this cross on my wall, and as I told you all, I have one that when my mother passed away and I went up in the attic, I didn't go in the attic. I don't go past the third step on a ladder. But a fellow minister that went with me went up in the attic. It's one of those things you have to stand on a ladder and pop yourself up there. And he brought down this cross. It didn't make any difference if it's cross or what it is. We don't worship things. And things don't bring us closer to God. When they were in the 40 years in the desert and they were bitten by snakes, God said, take brass, fabricate a snake, put it on a pole where you can lift it up and everybody can see it. And those that are bitten by a snake, now this is a dumb thing to do. You know, a lot of things the Lord asks us to do are dumb. It's whether we're willing to do them. It's important, not what they are. And God, because he told somebody, go dunk yourself in a river or go do this, and people would say, why would I want to go to a dirty river? Send me to a clean river. It doesn't make any difference what river. What's important is doing what God says, but exactly the way he says to do it. We don't take his word and play with it a little bit and paint it and dress it up and then do it our way. But God said, take brass and make a snake, put it on a pole, and just look at it. And if you do that, you'll be healed. And that's what they did, and they were healed. They kept that thing. And they were worshiping it. And this is where we were when we were talking about the lower two tribes, where he got rid of that thing. Let's see, we're in Judah. We go to Second Kings 18. Hezekiah is now king. They get rid of that junk in the temple. He, in the first year of his reign, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. They were in disrepair. Some people take better care of their cars than they do the things of the Lord. And he brought in priests and Levites, and he gathered them together. And he said, "Hear me, Levites." Levites was the whole tribe. If you were a Levite, you did something in the temple. Maybe you baked the showbread. Maybe you swept the floor. Maybe you carried water and poured it in the sea, or what used to be called in the tabernacle the laver. Maybe you were a doorkeeper. Maybe you played the trumpet. Maybe you sang in the choir. You had to be a direct descendant, not only the tribe, but the family of Aaron, to be a priest. But you had to be in the tribe of Levi to do anything at all in the temple. And he brought in the priests and the Levites. And he said, "Hear me, Levites. Okay, I'm looking for something here. Give me just a minute. I apologize. Going over to verse 16. And the priests went into the inner part of the house of the Lord to cleanse it. The inner part of the house of the Lord. There are two parts, the holy place and the Holy of Holies, whether we're talking about the tabernacle or the temple. The priests can go into the larger area, which made up 2/3 of the building. But you couldn't go into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could go one time a year. And you know how important it was that they do everything just right? We talked, I think last week, or the week before, they needed some priests to do some things, and some of them were not ceremoniously clean. That involved bathing and doing certain things, and sometimes waiting a certain period of time. So if you weren't ceremoniously clean, you couldn't serve as a priest. You could when you were ceremoniously clean. So they ran out of priests that were ceremoniously qualified. It doesn't mean they sinned. It simply meant that they had not done everything that the priest had to do before he could serve. And so some other people came. They were younger, but they assisted in doing some of the things. Well, the priests went into the inner part to clean it. Now, in the Holy of Holies, none of the priests could go in. Ever, ever, ever. The high priest went in once a year. If he failed, if he messed around and did not seriously take every step he had to become ceremoniously clean, he died. Well, the rest of the priests couldn't go in for his body. So what did they do? And where is my priest? I usually have him close by. but I brought some instruments and some other things here, and I don't see him. Let me check. No, he's not back there. Okay. Around his waist, they tied a rope. And the rope went underneath the curtain, the veil. So that if he didn't prepare and he died, they couldn't go in. What are you going to do? Let his body rot in there? So they could pull the rope and pull him out that way. So you see how important it is that you don't go places you're not supposed to go. But the temple was being reconditioned. They had, other priests and other kings had allowed it to need work done on it. And so they were in that place now. But it was okay because they were in there to bring it up to the way it should be. And the priests went into the inner part to clean them. And they brought out all the uncleanness that they found in the temple of the Lord into the court of the house of the Lord. That's outside, just outside the temple. And the Levites took it to carry it abroad into the brook of Kidron. They began on the first month to sanctify on the 8th day of the month the porch. They began to sanctify the things in the church, in the building. Sanctify has two meanings, always. The word sanctify always has one or the other of these meanings, or both. One is to dedicate for a specific purpose. It sounds strange to us because we don't use this kind of language, but I sanctify this piano. I give this piano to the house of the Lord, and it will not be used for rock music. We will not let people come in and do other things to this piano, because we are sanctifying this piano. We are dedicating it for the use of God only. The other meaning is to make holy or to make pure. So they began to sanctify some of the stuff that was in the temple. It needed to be made pure or rededicated for the purpose for which it had been dedicated, but it had become desecrated. Now the Catholic Church has a thing they do that I like, and I wish more churches did it. We don't hear about it too much because it isn't very often that you stop having church in a particular place and that place then becomes used for something commercial. But when we build a church, we dedicate it to the service of God. And usually another church buys it, or it burns down, or we add on to it. It isn't very often that we say, okay, we don't need this building anymore. We're going to build another building over here, and we're going to sell this to somebody who manufactures videotapes, whatever. The Catholics desanctify. In other words, they say, we dedicated this spot for the service of God, and now we take away that dedication, that it can only be used for that. So they did that. The Levites took it. They went to Hezekiah the king with a showbread table and all the vessels that Ahaz, when he was king, had. And they say, we have prepared and sanctified, and behold, there before the altar of God. We're going to continue here in 2 Chronicles, because temporarily we were in 2 Chronicles 29, and we still are, but we're in verse 20 now. Hang on just a second. If you'll give me just a minute, I want to check something. Okay, I had a little, for those that are watching the video, I had a little business to take care of. That happens sometimes when you're doing two things at once. Okay, now, we're in the 20th verse. Hezekiah the king got up early, and he gathered the rulers of the city, and he went up to the house of the Lord. And they brought the house of the Lord 7 bullocks and 7 rams and goats for a sin offering to the sanctuary of Judah. And they commanded the priests and the sons of Aaron to offer them on the altar. We get down to verse 24. The priests killed them, and they made them ready for reconciliation. They put the blood upon the altar. Verse 25, and the Levites in the house of the Lord had cymbals. Hang on. I brought some of the stuff was up here and some of it was downstairs, and I went and brought up here what was downstairs, some of the things I used to use when I was pastoring here. Don't be concerned, ladies, because what I need is what will come up later. Let's see. And he set the Levites. Remember, the Levites were of that tribe, but they weren't priests, but they had something to do with worship. So the Levites, they got cymbals. Psalteries were very similar to harps and harps. According to the commandment of David, and of Gad the king's seer. Now, this Gad, I don't believe, was one of Israel's sons. This was the king's, that would be Hezekiah's, seer. Seer is another word for prophet. And Nathan the prophet. For so it was the commandment of the Lord by his prophets. And the Levites stood with the instruments of David. I'm getting ready to talk about worship. Now, Hezekiah commanded to offer burnt offerings, and when they began, the song of the Lord began with the trumpets. that had been ordained by David. Remember I told you that Asaph was a name that immediately when it said one of his offsprings, I knew it had something to do with vocal music. David was not allowed to build the temple, but when he built it, or was unable to build it, he was talented like Michelangelo. Michelangelo, who did so many of the paintings in the Vatican, was also an architect, a designer for the cathedral in Rome. He painted. He had so many talents. And this Asaph, David made him and all of those of his family would have to do with the vocal music, with the singing music in the tabernacle. Let me see where I left off. And they consecrated things. And the congregation brought in sacrifices and thank offerings, and as many as were of a free heart, burnt offerings. This is where there were too few. And for the Levites were more upright in heart, they sanctified themselves. There were more Levites than there were priests available. And the burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, and the last verse I'm going to read right now, let me check on the time. Okay. Hezekiah rejoiced. King Hezekiah rejoiced. Now, okay. I want to talk about worship. And I would be very careful. What I did during worship. I've got something marked here. Let me find where it was and read it, because this does jump from one place to another. By the way, we have only this much before we are through with the divided kingdom. Do you remember when we were studying David? This has been probably 6 months ago. I showed you some videotape of I showed you the videotape of some what is called liturgical dancing. I showed you both in choir and as solos. since David was not allowed to build a temple, and David recognized, he said, I live in a palace. I'm a king. I live in a palace. Excuse me, there's something I want to do here. These things sometimes take me a while. I'm not all that good at it. Just a minute. I've got to get my keyboard over here so that I can type. Now, David said, I live in a palace, and God lives in a tent. Between that time and the time David died and Solomon became king and Solomon built the temple, between that time, David took the only piece of furniture in the Holy of Holies, which was the Ark of the Covenant, but that's where God's presence was, and he moved it into what I have never heard other preachers preach about. I'm sure that some do. But because we go through the Bible, if it's in the Bible, we've been there at least once, because we're in our second trip through. So we've been there at least once or twice. He took just the Ark of the Covenant, only what was in the Holy of Holies. The rest of the tabernacle stayed somewhere else, not in Jerusalem. But he brought that and he put it somewhere near the palace in Jerusalem. More than just in Jerusalem. It was on Mount Zion. More than on Mount Zion. It's what we call the Temple Mount. The place where the temple was and where it will be rebuilt. Probably sooner than most of us think. And for 24 hours a day, there was worship. Some of it was dancing. Some of it was instrumental music. Some of it was singing. We read during this time a prophecy that that time would happen again. There are, I'm not sure because it's not something I keep up with, so I haven't checked. But there were 5, 7, 8, 9, I don't know, places in the world where now different groups have, I don't want to use the word recreated, but there are now, and I would have looked it up if I would have realized ahead of time I was going to mention it, where some of them were. Where 24 hours a day there is the worship that there was in, it was called David's Tabernacle. And it didn't last too long. Solomon was king for only 40 years. And he built, by the middle of his reign, some of this. So at best, 50 years probably was how long this happened. Much less than my lifetime. But worship went on continually. What is worship? We have, I see we made the 500 mark, finally. I commented in my mailing, because, as I said, it's not the Christian thing to do to ask to be recognized. I mean, it isn't something you do, but apparently it is important to some people. So thank you guys that are clicking the button on the likes. You can do that once a day for each broadcaster. So I know you have loved me for the last year and a half that we've been here. I don't require 500 clicks, but apparently it's important to some people. So thank you. What is worship? We throw around terms like worship, praise. Did you know there are 3 kinds of music in church? There is worship. There is praise songs. And there is what is called gospel songs. Gospel songs, I don't know how many of you have in your church a songbook, but most churches don't have it anymore. They project the words to songs, and it seems to work out better for everybody. Things change, and we change with them. I can remember when I wasn't sure it would be good for me to have a television, and somebody was trying to give me one. And there wasn't much on television that was any good, and I was a traveling evangelist, and if you weren't in a city that had certain stuff, you couldn't get it anyway. But to think that I might later preach on television and later do something on the internet, I can remember when I wasn't even aware of what a computer was. I can remember when I went in our district office and I saw they had a computer with an electric cord that came out of the end of it. But worship or gospel songs are all the songs that used to be in the hymn book, and many what we would call special numbers that people do as solos or quartets or so forth. Songs like Amazing Grace, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. Those are not worship songs. They're nice songs. They're good. I love them. I love the old ones. I don't get enough of it. But they are not worship and they are not praise. They are gospel songs. Songs that discuss the Christian way of life, that discuss biblical things and so forth. Well, excuse me for those that are watching the video. It seems I'll give let me know when you get through with the camera, please, because this is rather interesting. And I apologize to those on our I want to make sure there's a reason that I'm waiting. Okay, do it again and tell me that you've done it again. And I have a reason. I don't always tell my reasons for what I do, but you can count on anything I'm doing that I have the reason for it. I need to know. Larry, bless your heart. You are precious. uh, he caught on to a secret and figured something out. Okay, there's a reason that I wanted to do this, and give me just a second. Now, I'm going to continue talking about worship. And I'm leaving to the Lord everything I say, everything that appears on the screen. You can mess with technology. I don't suggest messing with God. Write that in your book, brothers and sisters. You can mess with this preacher. Don't mess with God. And probably I should explain to those on the video, because it's a little bit different than most of my videos. We have had some things being written by trolls. Trolls are usually angry, psychotic people who try to make people mad. You know what? This old lady is full of the Holy Ghost and fire. You can't upset me. Because I serve a God that made all of this before we had technology. And long after I'm gone, he'll be around, and he will do the things that should be done. If not through me, through somebody else. But we've had some activity going on here. And I've needed to document it and do some things. So that's what's going on. You know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to end this video and immediately start another video, because I have just about 30 minutes left. This other, we've gone on for an hour and 18 minutes. So let me close that video down, and then I will immediately begin the other one. So hang in there. While it's publishing, I'll make another one.